Stop using API overloading. Use instead of that Web API optional parameters. What if I ask you a question? Are you creating multiple Web API endpoints just to handle small changes in input? Okay. What if I told you that one endpoint is more than enough? Today, I will show you how optional parameters in .NET Core Web API can save your time, code, and headache. By the end of this video, you will know what are optional parameters, how to use them in ASP.NET Core Web API, and what is difference between query optional parameters versus route optional parameters. Okay, so let's start. What are optional parameters? A parameter that your API can work without it. So if your parameter is not mandatory, is not compulsory, is called optional parameters. What are the use cases where these optional parameters are practically used in the project? When you want to when you want to do filtering of your data. For example, you have user data and you want to fetch the user data by role, admin role or accountant role. At that time, you can use optional parameters rather than creating multiple endpoints of the API. If you are using pagination, if you are using sorting, ascending, descending, or if you have in your project, you have a search functionality. In all these scenarios, you can use Web API optional parameters and avoid multiple endpoints. All right, so let's deep dive into the code. This is Web API project. It's .NET Core 9.0 Web API project. I have created a user control over here and we are going to create a user APIs. So say for example, let's take a use case scenarios where you want to fetch user by role as I discussed previously. Okay. So usually people or developer, I would say, what they do, they create multiple endpoints, which is a bad design. Say for example, public iaction result get user by admin. Okay, this is how the API is created. Sometimes by developers. HTTP. Oh, sorry, it's a HTTP GET API. Route. We'll keep the route same. Okay. User data fetched by admin role. Let's run the project. This is a very simple web API project. I'm not going to use any Postman or anything else to execute this API. We'll just use Chrome browser for this. Yeah. So if we go over here, if we type user slash get user by admin. Okay, user data fetched by admin role. This is exactly the same thing which we saw over here. Now, if you want to fetch the user data by accountant role, then usually what people do is copy paste accountant. And now for the same role, we have two API endpoints. One is get user by admin, one is get user by accountant. There is a common mistake which many of us developers do this, and then we have hundreds of APIs running on the production server. Okay, user slash get user by admin, what we saw, get user by accountant, user data fetched by accountant. Fine. So this is a wrong way of doing it. You should not use it. Instead of that, you should use query parameters. Okay. So now let's comment this. We will use query parameters. We will create just one endpoint and we will use that endpoint. Say for example, I am creating an API endpoint, I action result get by role, string role, okay, return. Ah, user data fetched by role, and let's put over here role. HTTP get. Route will keep the, oh sorry, keep the route same. Okay. So now we have just created one endpoint. There is no two endpoints for admin role and accountant role. We have just created one endpoint and we will just check how this API works. Okay. User slash get by role. Role is equal to admin. Great. User data fetched by role admin. Now if I change over here to accountant, user data fetched by role accountant. Right? Definitely you will have your database conditions over here, DB conditions out here, but rather than creating multiple endpoints, you have just created one endpoint, which is fine. But now the main problem comes. What if in your particular project, there will be a time where role will not be passed? So the parameter role will not be passed, and it is assumed that if the role is not passed, then you have to fetch all user data. In this scenario, what you will do? Let's check it out where the problem arises and how to solve this problem. Suppose I keep the API endpoint same. Let's go over here. Okay. So this was our. Now if I tell you that, okay, see, the error came. 400. The role field is required. Okay. So this is the common problem which we face in our projects where our parameters are optional and somewhere the same API is used, but we cannot pass the parameter, and somewhere in the project we pass the parameter. In this scenario, ideally what people do, they copy the API, they create a new API, say get all, forget this role, HTTP get all user data fetched. This is exactly what they do. Rather than making the API, web API input parameter as optional, they create a new endpoint and they run the project and they put it on production. So let's check now. User, I have user. Yeah. And if I don't want user, I use get all user data fetched. Right? So how to avoid multiple API endpoints and use the same API over here? What we are going to do is very simple. We are just going to have this question mark. This question mark symbolifies that this role is an optional parameter. You may pass it, you may not pass it. Okay. And we can write over here string dot is null or empty role. If it is true, then sorry, all user data fetched, and if the role is not empty, there is some parameter, some data in the parameter, then go into else condition, which is this. This is how we save multiple API endpoints, and we can use the same API endpoint and we can configure the optional parameters. Let's check it out. Project is running. Okay, great. Let's see, we have this. Okay, user data fetched by role admin. If you have accountant, then by role accountant. If you don't have any role, all user data fetched. Okay, so the same API endpoint is used for multiple input parameters of API. Fine. So this is what we saw is about optional parameter with query string. Now let's check optional parameter using route. So we take another use case scenario. Say for example, we want to fetch order data. Fine. Let's go with order data. We want to fetch order data, get orders. Okay. Int order ID, return. Okay. Order data fetched for order ID. This is order ID. Okay. HTTP get out. We put it over here. Okay. Well, we can put it over here. Order slash order ID. Okay, so this symbolizes that we are not using query parameter, but we are passing the parameter in the route itself. So let's check it out. Project is running. Okay, fine. Oh, sorry. User slash get orders slash 12. Okay. User data fetched for order ID 12. If we pass 100, we'll get user data, sorry, order data fetched for order ID 100. Fine. But what if I want to fetch all orders? I don't want to fetch order by ID, but if I want to fetch all orders. So if I remove this and if I do, see, it is not working. It is giving HTTP error 404 API not found. Okay. So over here we can use route optional parameters The simple way over here is again question mark. This question mark symbolizes that it's an optional parameter. It is not mandatory, and you don't have to create a different endpoint, API endpoint called get all orders. You can use the same API endpoint, and what you can do over here is if order ID is equal to null and all order data fetched, else fetch order data by order ID. Let's check it out. Project is running. Okay. Okay, we can use over here. Okay, no, sorry. User slash get order slash 100. If I want all orders, oh, it's still not working. Okay, let me check. Okay, sorry, a small mistake over here. Whenever you pass the route parameter, you have to put question mark over here also so that the route also understands that it's an optional parameter. So I missed this question mark over here. So now let's check it out. I start the project, run the project. Project is running. Yes. Okay, we came over here. User slash get orders slash 1. So if you order data fetch for order ID 1, if it is 100, we fetch it for 100. Now if I want all orders, if I remove this, I don't pass order ID, all order data fetch. Fine. So let's check it out. What are the best practices? Fine. Okay, we run over here. Okay. So what are the best practices which you need to follow while using optional parameters? Use query parameters for filtering and paging. Use route parameters for resource identity. That is this. If you want to use route parameter, use it for resource identity. And if you want to just filter the data, you can use it over here. Validate inputs even if optional, which I completely agree in production. If it is blank, you should validate whether it's null or it's empty or it's zero, whatever it is. And keep the API behavior predictable. That's also very important. So finally, how this optional parameter has helped you. It reduces API clutter, it improves flexibility, and it is very useful in writing cleaner and smart APIs. So if you really like this video, then do subscribe to the channel, do like this video and share with your friends. Thank you.